Hi guys, good morning. Happy Thursday. I'm not sure. There's this weird glare. Hold on, I'm gonna try to shut my blind. Not really much better. Happy Thursday. It was good to see some of you yesterday. I know Mrs. Weiner hoped to um, do that again and hope to see more of you. I might attempt to try to start doing read alouds on Zoom, but my concern is that some people don't have time to watch them at 10 o'clock and maybe have to watch them later on when their parents are home or when the computer's available. Most people are sharing one or two computers. So I'm going to get back to our read aloud. So if you remember from the last chapter, Ava had to take her math test and she kept writing down, she had to write down the question and then she heard the little voice telling her the answer. So this one was called, or the next chapter is called Secrets of the Chocolate Chip Cookie Club, which I love chocolate chips. So here we go. How do you do on the math test? Sophie asked as they headed for their lockers before lunch. Pretty good, actually. The weirdest thing happened, though. It was like Ava, Mrs. Romere called down the hallway, flapping a pile of sheet music so frantically it looked like she might be trying to get off the ground and fly. Miss Romero was tiny, with a streak of green in her curly black hair. She looked like a hummingbird darting and weaving through the maze of bodies and backpacks. When she reached Ava, she held up the music. Sophie told me you're trying out for jazz band, so I pulled a few pieces I thought you might like. You'll need to play one of these and do a few bars of improvisation, okay? Um, Ava looked at Sophia, who played drums and had told Ava last week that she should come to some jazz tryouts. Ava was certain she hadn't said yes. She probably said something like, "That sounds interesting. I'll have to check it out," which in Ava language meant that sounds terrifying. But you won't understand, so I'll nod for now and then forget to show up. But here was Miss Romero with music. Tryouts are 2 weeks from today in the band room. You can come during study hall or after school, okay? Miss Romero gave Ava the music and turned to go. See you then. We'll be there, Sophia called after her. You'll be there, Ava said as she and Sophia walked down the hall. I never said I'd go for sure. Why not? What's the worst thing that could happen? You try out, it doesn't go well, and you don't get in, right? Wrong. I could show up with my saxophone and be so nervous that I pass out and hit my head on the floor, and then they'd have to call an ambulance, disrupting the auditions so no one else could try out either. And I'd be known for the rest of time as the girl who single-handedly shut down the middle school jazz band. Also, my saxophone would be dented and my mom would kill me for dropping it, even if I managed to survive the fall. Sophia laughed. Fine. Ready for lunch? Ava hesitated. Her stomach was tied up in knots for the chaos of the school cafeteria. But plus, Sophia's eighth grade gymnastic friends had started sitting with them, and Ava couldn't tell if they liked her or not. Actually, I need to go to the library. She didn't mention that her need had more to do with space and quiet than shelving books for the librarian, Mrs. Galvin. Okay, see you after school then. Sophia turned toward the noise of the cafeteria and Ava headed for the library. She stopped when she saw the sign by the door. Chocolate Chip Cookie Club today. Mrs. Galvin held special activities in the library during lunch and after school. Chocolate Chip Cookie Club was a reading thing with poems and stuff. It used to be called Word Power, but not many people came to meetings until she changed the name. Ava peered into the library. It was already busier than she liked. She understood that lots of kids liked the club, but she couldn't help feeling resentful about so many loud voices and crumbs invading what she'd come to think of as her sanctuary. Ava, I'm so happy you're here today. I think you'll love this group. I don't want to be in the club, Ava blurted, and then felt bad when she saw Mrs. Galvin's smile fade. Ava liked Mrs. Galvin. She recommended good books and had cool quotes posted all over the library, but she and Ava just didn't think the same way. The one time Ava had stayed in the library for a lunchtime writing workshop last year, Mrs. Galvin had waved her notebook around, telling everyone that "what if" was the greatest phase in the English language. Ava couldn't have disagreed more. In fact, those were just about the worst two words in the universe. They led the charge for every one of Ava's worries. If you can't tell, Ava has a little bit of anxiety, and so she worries constantly about things, which I think we can all kind of relate to right now. What if I fail math class? What if I lose my pencil before Mr. Farkley's quiz? What if somebody I love dies? What if there's a terrorist attack, or an earthquake, or a school shooting? What if we're not Ava's friends, and she had trouble trusting anyone who liked them as much as Mrs. Galvin did? I didn't know club was today. I was going to shelf books, but I don't have to. Ava started to turn away. That's okay. You can shelve during our meeting. Mrs. Galvin gave Ava a cart of books and hurried off to print copies of the club's poem for the day. Ava started with the fiction. There were some new quotes on the wall above the bookshelf. A room without books is like a body without a soul. I have always imagined that paradise will be a kind of library. The weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. Any fool can know. The point is to understand. Einstein wrote that. Ava smiled. Marcus would love the last one. He had Einstein posters in his bedroom. Okay, let's get started, Mrs. Galvin told the kids at the tables. Ava could hear her voice from the other side of the shelf. Sometimes when you talk about poetry in English class, your teacher will want you to analyze every line and look for the similes and metaphors. Can anybody remember what those are? A simile is a figure of speech that describes one thing by comparing it to something else, using the words like, as, or than, someone said. It sounded like Leo Kim, with a mouthful of cookie. And a metaphor is a more direct comparison without like, as, or than. Like if I said, those cookies are bites of heaven. Great, Mrs. Galvin said. Are we going to read a poem and pick out the similes and metaphors? Someone asked, and a bunch of other people groaned. No, Mrs. Galvin said. We're reading a poem that makes fun of them. Ava was curious about that. It was hard to imagine a grown-up poet making fun of something serious like metaphors. She crept around the bookshelf and sat down at the empty table with a pile of books so she could listen while she pretended to sort them. Mrs. Galvin must have noticed. She wandered by and dropped a copy of the poem and a cookie onto Ava's table before she went back to the club. Such a smart teacher. The poem was called Litany, Billy Collins. The guy who wrote it started out like any other fancy poet by telling somebody's, his wife or girlfriend, Ava guessed, that she was bread, a knife, a goblet, and wine. That already seemed like a lot of things for one person to be, but then he went on to compare her to pretty much everything else in the world. She was morning dew and a fish and an apron, but not boots, in a corner, or a bunch of other stuff. And then the poet made a list of all the weird things he was, the moon and the rain and some blind lady's teacup, and it was pretty clear he was totally mocking metaphors. That's awesome, one of the 8th grade girls said when Mrs. Galvin finished. The boys thought so too. They started making up their own metaphors. I am the touchdown in the final moments of the game, Luke said, holding his arms up to the ceiling. Isaiah scoffed, Dude, you're the chewed gum under the bench. You are the smelly socks I left in my gym bag, shouted Alex, and the dog poop on the soccer field. That made Leo laugh so hard he spit cookie crumbs all over the table, which made Mrs. Galvin raise her voice a little. I think we have time for one more poem. She glanced at the library clock, maybe a short one, and flipped through a fat book of poetry from her desk. This is by Robert Frost, she said. It's called Secret Sits. Mrs. Galvin rolled the poem in about 5 seconds flat. It was about a bunch of people dancing around in a circle trying to guess a secret, and the secret was in the middle, sitting there, doing nothing. That was the whole poem. I'll read it one more time, Mrs. Galvin said. Ava was glad. She liked the poking fun at metaphors poem, but this one bugged her. And when Mrs. Galvin read it again, she figured out why. The secret was all kinds of smug about everybody trying to guess it and not knowing. Mrs. Galvin looked up. Anybody want to talk about this one? Yeah, Alex said. I think the secret's kind of a jerk. Leo laughed, but Mrs. Galvin just nodded thoughtfully. How so? Alex just shrugged. Because. Ava surprised herself by answering out loud. Everyone turned her way and her stomach tensed, but she kept talking. We all try so hard to figure out what we're supposed to figure out. And we get stuff wrong all the time, and it's like the secret doesn't want to help us. Like it doesn't even care about all our questions. Mrs. Galvin looked right at Ava. She blinked a few times, then nodded. And when you're a person who really likes answers, that bothers you. Yes, Ava let out a rush of breath. It does. The bell rang then. The room emptied out. Ava finished shelving her pile of books and started for the door. Ava, Mrs. Galvin called from the table where she was pushing in chairs. I'm glad you decided to join us. Yeah, I guess I sort of did. Will I see you for our next meeting? I'll be here, Ava said. She was pretty sure she meant it this time. So the next chapter is called The Pencil Nose. So I hope you enjoyed that chapter. I think we learned a lot about Ava. I think she's a pretty strong character, and we learned that she worries a lot and that she doesn't like a lot of people around her, and that she gets very, very nervous about tests and not getting the answers right, and that she worries a lot about everything, whether it's school or home or what's happening in the world. She's always worried. So I'm hoping that Ava's going to tell us how she deals with all these worries. I also am going to post poems for today since it's Friday and April's Poetry Month, and then I'm going to have you do a poetry activity for today. So look for that, and I know that Mrs. Weiner and I hope to do another Zoom. I think Mrs. Weiner and I will be around next week, but I'm going to try to schedule a Zoom for tomorrow at 10. So look for the funny poems coming soon. Bye, guys.